Okay, yeah.
Great.
First and foremost, I'm going to let you know that we want to record this session so that we can add it to our YouTube channel. Check us out. We'll drop our YouTube handle and our Instagram socials in the chat so y'all can all look and follow us. But we will begin recording this. And so for your reference, I just want you all to know that we're going to record this. So if you don't want to be on the camera, just let us know. Turn off your camera if that's not what you want to do. But we would love to see your faces if you want to show your face. So my name is LaShawn Shawnee Adams. I am the president of this amazing chapter of Chi Sigma Mu. And the initiative for our year is social justice advocacy in action. And so we want to foster community, belonging, and mentorship. So with that being said, we decided that the only way that we can foster social justice advocacy is to bring social justice advocates to Montclair State University so that we can bridge the gap and show people what does it look like? Who are our advocates in the world and how us as counselors and future counselors can actually engage in social justice advocacy work as well. So with all due, we will have questions throughout the panel discussion, but please feel free to drop it through the chat. We will hold all questions until the end. But if something sparks your mind or your interest, where you're like, oh, I need to say this, drop it in the chat and we'll save it for our Q&A session at the end. But with that being said, I'm going to go and pass it to Jenny Taylor, our secretary. Sorry, first of all, I lied. Before we go to Jenny Taylor, I do want to introduce our e-board, our fabulous e-board who has worked so hard to get our wonderful panelists here and also work diligently to spearhead this program. I want to first introduce Stephanie Ceballo. She is our president-elect here for Chi Sigma Mu. We have Susan Motormed. Did I say it right, girl? I said that she is our wonderful treasurer. She handles the money here for us. We have Jana. I'm not about to mess up your last name. So I'm gonna, she is our student liaison. She's the one who puts together our flyers. She's the one who puts together those wonderful emails that we send out to you. And she's the one that just keeps us all in check. And then we have Dr. Koyman. He is the head honcho for us. He is our faculty advisor for Chi Sigma Mu, and he has kept us all together.
You have to click the email, click the link.
I just want to say real quick, I've got somebody working in my apartment today, so I may be off and on, but I'll be here.
No problem.
Welcome, everybody. Glad you're here.
And thank you for being here, Dr. Koyman. We really appreciate you. And our other faculty members too, Dr. Baker, I see Dr. Killian. It's good to see you all for and our wonderful masters and doctoral students who are here to support as well. And so with all due respect, I'm going to pass it to Jenny Taylor so that she can introduce us to the main event, which are our panelists who are here to talk with us.
Thank you, Shawnee. Yes, my name is Jenny, and I am the secretary of Chi Sigma Mu. And now I have the honor of introducing our panelists. I will start off with Jessica Smedley. Jessica currently serves as the Director of School Counseling for Hillsborough Township Public Schools in Hillsborough, New Jersey. Jessica has been a school counseling administrator for 14 years. Prior to that, Jessica was a middle school and high school counselor. Jessica is the immediate past president of New Jersey School Counselors Association, where she has led legislative advocacy efforts for the past 2 years. Jessica is currently a doctoral candidate here at Montclair State University and is writing her dissertation about school counselors' anti-racist and equity work within her school district. Her other research interests include school counselor supervision and school counselors' professional development. Jessica is the owner of Gold Stars Counseling and Consulting, LLC, a private practice in Princeton, New Jersey, focused on providing counseling for individuals and families. And next we have Patrice Hamilton. Patrice is a lifelong resident of Middletown, New York. She currently serves as the New York State Ambassador for the Sickle Cell Disease Association of America. After being diagnosed with sickle cell at birth, she nearly succumbed to her complications as a teenager, which placed her ability to graduate high school at risk. Patrice persevered and overcame the academic challenges impacted by her health, and now she holds a master's degree in forensic psychology. She has received multiple awards for her resilience and advocacy. Patrice has made it her mission to improve the quality of life for all who suffer from sickle cell as she shares her testimony to anyone who will listen. Patrice has held various pageant titles and is the reigning international Miss Mid-Atlantic 2022. Sickle cell disease awareness and education has consistently remained her platform. As someone who was told she wouldn't live to see adulthood or become a mother, she works full-time as a social worker specializing in children's behavioral health and wellness services. She is actively involved in her church as a missionary, choir director, and chairperson for the Young Adult Christian Ministry. She is a proud alumnus of Alpha Kappa Phi Agonian Sorority, Inc. She is actively involved in her child's school as a PTA president and notes being a mother to her 10-year-old son, Dylan, to be her greatest accomplishment. Patrice gives God all the glory and the honor for how far she has come. And last but not least, we have Susan Mack. Susan joined the League of Women Voters in early 2017 and quickly became the voter registration chair. In 2020, she was able to successfully recruit a co-chair, and together they covered voter registration throughout Essex County via the Town Team platform. The co-chairs, along with the town teams, held over 101 voter registration events, even with COVID, and completed 672 voter registration forms in 2020. She is committed to the League's mission of empowering voters and defending democracy, along with the League's nonpartisan and grassroots ideals. Her first career was in finance for 23 years, and then she was in social work, where she worked with foster children and later children with mental health and developmental disabilities for 11 years. She has now created her own nonprofit, Empower Together, Inc., dedicated to eliminating the achievement gap by utilizing the wraparound model of care. So clearly we have some incredible panelists here, and I can't wait to hear what they have to say about their advocacy work. So let's jump into the questions. First question is, what led you to choose, oh, sorry, Shani, were you gonna say something?
Oh, no, that wasn't me. That must have been one of our guests who just came in.
Oh, sorry. Okay, back to the first question. What led you to choose your path as an advocate, and why do you think advocacy is important? Whoever feels compelled to speak first can jump on in.
Okay, I guess I'll go first. Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for those that are in attendance. What led to my path as an advocate, specifically for the Sickle Cell Disease Association of America, is I have sickle cell disease, and a lot of the issues that I dealt with as a child, I didn't really understand what was happening to me, nor did my parents. And so there was no one for me to talk to. There was no one for me to explain exactly what was happening, especially when you suffer from an invisible illness. So briefly, for those that may not know what sickle cell is, it is a genetically inherited, life-threatening blood disorder. And I endure a great deal of pain on a pretty regular basis. I've been hospitalized more times than I can count. And things can be perfectly fine one moment, and at any given moment, I hope and pray that I don't end up enduring severe pain during this panel discussion and have to be rushed off to the hospital. I can go months without an incident, and there are times I can't even go a few minutes without one. And so not having anyone to talk to about it and not really fully understanding my diagnosis nor my prognosis, it was very challenging. And it was a happy accident that it wasn't until I actually joined my sorority during my undergrad years, Alpha Kappa Phi Agonian Sorority Incorporated, that my sorority sisters embraced my condition and took it on as one of our philanthropies and helped fundraise, helped spread education and awareness, and really took interest in what was happening to me and what was happening to so many others that have sickle cell. And it was actually as an alumnus during, after I had completed my graduate education, that I came back 9 months pregnant to visit my sorority as they had hosted a sickle cell carnival. And it just so happened that the president of the New York Sickle Cell Advocacy Network happened to be in attendance to support, that she and I struck up a conversation, and from there it the rest is history. With each pageant title that I've attained, I've utilized my voice and my crown as a microphone in order to spread education and awareness about sickle cell.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Patrice.
Thank you.
Susan, would you like to share?
Sure. Yeah, I quickly rose my hand there when nobody else was. But yeah, I used to do a lot of advocacy for my clients when I was in social work, trying to get them services, trying to advocate for in the school system, helping my parents of my clients as well. So they didn't feel alone in their process. So once after I retired or decided to do my own nonprofit, I was really missing a lot of the day-to-day advocacy. So back in 2017, I guess it was, there was a lot of division. There was a lot back then. There's even more now in our country. I had friends on both sides, friends and family on both sides of the aisle. And I just really believe strongly that the only solution to our country to come back together is through a nonpartisan way. And so I sought out, I actually joined a couple organizations. One of them was the League of Women Voters. And I, believe strongly that, working together, having dialogue together is the way that we can get past this mess that our country is in right now. So I got very passionate and, and decided that voter registration and voter education were the areas that I wanted to work in within that framework of bringing our country back together.
Thank you, Susan. And last but not least, where did Jessica go?
I'm here.
Awesome.
So I think my advocacy work I really see as twofold, but I would say locally in my school district, and I think probably what maybe was my invitation to be here today started with my own learning. Actually, I had a pretty transformative experience during my doctoral multicultural counseling class with Dr. Baden. That was the fall of 2018. So unfortunately, I'm one of those people it's taking a little while to get out of the program, but it's going to happen. Anyway, and so that was the first time in a long time that I had been back in school. So I got my master's degree right out of college, and then did my EDS degree 10 years after that, and then started my doctoral program 10 years after that. So to be back in the classroom, I feel like, and having a transformative experience about issues that I needed to confront myself as someone who had been in the field for over 15 years at that point, both as in school counseling and as a NLPC, working in private practice and with families in their communities. I feel like that sparked an interest of mine, one, to read, and those of you, I heard some people put in the chat that they are in the school counseling track or preparing to be school counselors currently, and I feel like there isn't that much opportunity for us to continue that growth. Hence my other application of the professional development and ongoing learning. So I got really inspired to work with people here, and if you've read any articles about anything regarding school counseling, almost every single one of them starts somewhere along the lines of school counselors and counselors in general are well positioned to be advocates for students, for families, for marginalized populations, but also for ourselves and the profession. And so I do a lot of work in my school district with counselors and other educational professionals. So we cross across all power. We try to unbalance the power differences and really work together to try to move our equity initiatives forward in a district that's going through a lot of significant changes, most notably economic changes over the past 5 to 10 years. And so our population of students look different. And so trying to unearth some and really talk and dig into biases and planning and equitable practices for students and all kinds of things here. And that really then led to my interest. My story of becoming the president of New Jersey School Counselors Association was definitely one of those sort of happenstance snowballing things where you're in a place and you somehow got voluntold that you're going to do something, but then you end up there and you realize it was the perfect fit for you all along. And so around the time when I was the president-elect, we were actually approached as an association by Assemblywoman Angela McKnight, who is an assemblywoman up in North Jersey, might be even representing some of your districts if you live up near Montclair. And she had an experience with her son's school counselor when he was planning to go to college. And she talked to him about the complications of why school counselors can't spend as much time counseling students, working with them on advising because of the number of unrelated things that they get assigned to do in schools, and how for a lot the caseloads are so high. We have a lot of schools in New Jersey who don't have school counselors, so which means we have thousands of students who are not supported by a school counselor. So working with Assemblywoman McKnight, our team, our executive board at the time, which then grew into a legislative committee, started getting involved. We did hire a lobbyist. I try to be upfront about that we could not have done what we did with just by ourselves, even though we're great advocates. And we got really good at talking to legislators, assemblymen and women and senators. And that has led us to some really good conversations. We were poised perfectly with the where we were at the pandemic and sort of a little bit more of a focus. There's a lot of focus if you read any of our state news. Governor Murphy's involved in a lot of that. So we are working to pass legislation that would define the role of a school counselor and help most specifically our school administrators up through the superintendents, the state school board, to really understand the training and how school counseling as a profession has changed so dramatically over the past 20 years. And we're going to really try hard by the end of my professional career to not have anyone use the word guidance counselor anymore. That's probably more of a challenge than anything else, but we're going to get there.
Yeah. That's awesome, Jessica. Thank you. And so it seems like a lot of you kind of fell into your advocacy work either by just being in the right place at the right time, meeting the right people. And so Jessica, you went into a little bit of what your advocacy work looks like, speaking with all of these people. Is there anything else you want to share about what that work specifically looks like for you, maybe day to day?
So I think it's a little being able to talk to people and have that be like, have your elevator pitch ready and have it be really become a part of you and who you are. I would say I take a lot of grief from a lot of people, including highly experienced people who, again, really don't understand what school counseling is. And so I think first is getting knowledgeable about the field, like what can we do? There are a lot of people who work in schools. And if you remember from your experience in school, if you've ever worked in a school, perhaps as a parent or a sibling of someone who's in school, we get stuck. Schools get stuck in their way of doing things, and it's really hard for them to change. And so the legacy of how things are done and what we have available to us is important for us. No one's ever going to stand up and become a marketing firm or a PR firm for school counselors, or LPCs, by the way, but or anyone in community counseling either. But so we have to do it ourselves. So there are a lot of people who have been in education a long time who still believe that this is a 4 classes beyond a teaching certificate. And even a very powerful and very well-paid lobbyist from the New Jersey Education Association, which, by the way, does represent approximately 6,000 school counselors in New Jersey, even though we have to remind them about that sometimes because they tend to be a little bit more on the instructional side, that when we first started talking about our bill, Fran Pfeffer, who has since corrected herself in legislative testimony, said the first time, if we pass this bill for there to be more school counselors in New Jersey, we're not going to have any teachers because all the teachers are going to want to become guidance counselors. And so part of it's just educating people who are even supposed to be the representatives of that. Like the amount of people who don't know that the training, and it's even going further with this 60 credit requirement for KCREP, but that the training, we are being trained to be mental health professionals. And it is really important. And there's a little bit of code switching that goes on in schools where you have to come in, or at least if you're going to advocate for the field of school counseling, you have to know your educator identity, because you have to be able to talk to teachers in teacher terms, and administrators are mostly teachers too. So you have to be able to talk in education terms and have that educator mindset where we are part of the educational system, but you also have to be really clear on what your counselor identity is and what your training is. That when you're talking if you're sitting in a conference room and you're talking about your superintendent is talking about, we don't have enough Black students in our AP courses. As a school, as a counselor, you need to what's my positionality to this topic, and what are we doing for students? So the answer that some people might offer, or in my experience have offered, is just take away the prerequisite, because that's what will get more Black and brown students in our AP classes. And so that is one perspective, but we're trained systemic, we're trained to be systemic thinkers. We're trained to look at angles of like, what happens when students do get there? What barriers have we put in place all along in these students' education, that we're not just gonna randomly one year have more Black and brown students signing up for AP calculus. So I think it's a part of, that's a very long answer to like, it's a part, you have to get clear on it yourself first, of like what you stand for, what has your preparation, like what has this program prepared you to do, whether that's doctoral or master's level work, like what have you sort of has been instilled in you, and what do you stand for? Because then it's really easy to talk to people about things you're passionate. It's easy to stay passionate. It's easy to like knock down people's disbeliefs of what you're doing, and really keep it focused on, when we typically say kids or students, not clients, but you keep it focused on who your stakeholders are. Like, why is it important? Why do you come here and do that every day? And why do you continue talking about our profession every day?
Thank you. Susan or Patrice, do either of you want to touch a little bit about what your daily advocacy work looks like?
Sure. I was giving Susan a moment because I didn't know. Yeah, I mean, my advocacy, it is in fact on a daily basis, because I'm living my advocacy. So I will talk about sickle cell to any and everyone that will listen. In fact, there are certain things certain subtle cues that people are not always aware of, that I fill them in on and educate them on, such as coworkers, friends, family members, strangers on the street. So for instance, the fact that I do not drink cold water. Oftentimes people think that I'm weird because I don't drink cold water, or that I prefer my water at room temperature, but they don't realize until I tell them that it's actually a survival tactic. Because if I drink cold water or ice water, which is always constantly offered to me, you visit someone's home, they offer you a glass of water, they're quick to give you a glass of ice water. But the reason for which I don't drink cold water is because it narrows your blood vessels and it hardens those vessels and those arteries and those veins, and it makes it even more challenging for my sickled cells to pass through the bloodstream. So it can elicit a sickle cell crisis just by me drinking a cold glass of water. And also, when it comes to having to stay warm and stay hydrated, and sometimes needing to just take a break and take a mental health break, because stress can induce a sickle cell crisis. There's been times where, and that's when I say stress, I mean emotional, physical, mental, you name it. I once educated a pediatric nurse at the gym, because while I went to the gym with a friend, and she noticed this woman who never met me before, noticed that I was breathing awfully heavy very early in the workout. And that's because my red blood cells don't hold as much oxygen as the average person's. And so she stops me and she says, are you okay? Because you're too young to be breathing this heavy so soon. I'm much older than you are, and I'm not breathing that way. And she explained to me what her profession was and that she expressed concern. And I explained to her, I am fine. I appreciate your concern, but because I have sickle cell, that's why just going up a flight of stairs, you would think without looking at me that I was more seasoned in life, that I was of a more advanced age, because I'm huffing and puffing, but I'm also adamant about keeping up with my peers and keeping up with what everyone else is doing. But I do have to remind myself that some days I do have limits. So while I like to pretend that I'm fearless and limitless, I'm also a realist, and I have to listen to my body. So that's my day to day, just wherever I am, whatever it is that I'm doing, these basic tasks, oftentimes I find turn into a full-fledged lesson about sickle cell disease and, you know, what detrimental things can happen if I don't take the time out to stop, or if I do drink that cold glass of water. And I don't ever want to make people feel bad, but I do have sometimes people feeling bad because they make fun of me for thinking I'm weird. But then when they learn the truth about what my health condition is, and that there's so many other people out there that are also dealing with it, and because they don't want to be called weird, they will drink the cold glass of water, or they will keep and push and go that extra mile, and that leads them to hospitalization and potentially the grave. And so a lot of people choose to engage in what we call sickle cell silence and just not talk about their condition because they feel alone, they feel helpless, they feel limited. And that's where I step in as an advocate to let it be known, no, talk about it. I know it can be embarrassing. I know it can, you know, it can definitely be debilitating, but if no one is aware of what your condition is and how they can help, then you're only doing yourself and our community a disservice.
And that's exactly why we need advocates like you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Susan, do you want to talk about your daily work as well?
Sure. So most of my day-to-day activities are engaging both volunteers, strategizing how do we, reach out to the community, how do we engage with the community, with voter registration, what should we be focused on, where should we be focusing on it. So hopefully in future questions I can talk more about exactly, some of the initiatives we're working on right now, but that's kind of the general gist.
Sure. Thank you. So I will have you start this next question, if you don't mind. What are some challenges you may have encountered in your work, and how did you overcome? Or if you're still working through them, how are you navigating them?
Sure. So there are a lot of challenges when it comes to social justice advocacy. As I just mentioned, engaging with the community, it's so hard to get our message out to the community. This was a real challenge during COVID. People were voting in very different ways than they had ever voted before. So we were trying to get the message out, and there's just so much content, right? There's the traditional news sources, there's all the social media. What we started doing, we engaged a communications chair to start a series of fact or fiction, which we thought was kind of like, flashy, and people would, it was quick, you can read it fast. And it was really, we got some great feedback on that. But again, the outlets were, mostly online news sources. And some, Montclair has a newspaper that would take in our content, but it was tough to reach, a significant amount of people. So we still were getting lots of questions, which was fine. The other part is connecting with volunteers. We had started off with a couple hundred people that had crossed our paths in one way or the other. At every voter registration table we asked people to sign up for an email. So now we're at about 900, which is great. But what we have found is prior to our new website in 2020, it was mostly me calling people or texting people, engaging with them, one-on-one. And we got great, plus it was a different time period. So, I never had a problem, covering any type of voter registration events. But then we got this great new website, which everything's digitized. So you can never talk to a person and, sign up for a voter registration event, hear about a voter registration event, and follow-up is all. And what we have found is there's been a sharp drop-off of engagement with the volunteers. So it's great. It's very efficient to do it all digitally, but what we have found is people aren't necessarily as engaged. So we're kind of addressing that now, and it's a never-ending. It's very time-consuming to do it in person, but I think there's got to be kind of an in-between model somewhere. And lastly, it's getting people to actually want to vote, which is heartbreaking. One thing that anyone that's done any type of voter registration with colleges or high schools is, college is actually worse, actually, I gotta tell you, than high schools, is people don't, people are apathetic. They think that, what's the point? They're all the same. It doesn't matter who I vote for. And someone who's really, passionate about voter registration, it's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking. So this was back in 2019, 2020. One of our volunteers who was a former educator said, this was really hard for him too. And said, I'll create a Why Voting Matters lesson plan content. So we have this program that we have rolled out to several different types of high schools and other educational platforms, like after school activities, things like that. And it's been great. The last one we did in Orange High School, everybody was really jazzed about voting, understanding why it is so important, and everybody in the class registered to vote. I mean, I'm sure that was some peer pressure, but you know what? I'll take peer pressure. I mean, whatever it takes. A lot of things in life are peer pressure, so I have no problems with that. But it's just being perseverant, pivoting when you need to. Those are a lot of the challenges that we're dealing with.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Patrice or Jessica, either of you want to speak on the challenges?
Okay. Yeah, there are a lot of challenges in my sickle cell advocacy. I always say it's very hard to advocate for sickle cell and have sickle cell at the same time. And that's also why I was selected as the New York State ambassador, because I am so presumably healthy. As Ms. Gloria Rochester, the president of the New York Sickle Cell Advocacy Network, has explained, is I can be that voice because I don't get sick as often as most of the people that represent my community, but I do still get sick. In fact, every January for 3 consecutive years, I've been invited to speak at a conference in Albany in honor of Martin Luther King Day, and I've never made it. I don't know if I'll get extended an invitation for the 4th time in 2023, but I've never made it because the winters are extremely difficult for people with sickle cell. The cold weather is just not kind to us at all. That's when hospitalizations are at their all-time high. There's that. There's also the fact that I always say that the greatest challenge isn't even having sickle cell, it's finding people who care. Similar to Susan, having to find people that even want to vote and are willing to vote, having to find people that want to learn about sickle cell and are willing to learn about sickle cell and to take action and do something about it, whether it is attending a conference, attending a walk, attending a special event, donating funds for research for a cure. And I do get a lot of inbox messages and emails from friends with articles about cures. There's no universal cure. And while I do appreciate that their hearts are in the right place, I kind of have that mindset of I am aware of this, that this woman in Canada was cured from sickle cell, but it was just this woman from Canada, not everybody else, because there's no cure that is applicable to everyone. In fact, there are some recent remedies that can actually do just the opposite. So like such as bone marrow transplants and gene hormone therapy, which if your body is not a qualified candidate, or you might think you're a qualified candidate and the transplant doesn't take, well, then you already know what the end result of that is. And the greatest challenge, actually above all, I say it's finding people who care. It's that my friends die. it's that I connect with other people in the sickle cell community, and I'm made to feel like, wow, I'm not alone, and you go through the same thing that I go through. And we talk about each other's childhoods and what it was like to be misunderstood or to be told we were acting weird, because having an invisible illness and this invisible killer that beats you up on a daily basis, but there's no marks to show it. There's no one. It's like having someone come up to you and just repeatedly punch you, and you're defenseless because you don't see them coming. You don't know when it's going to happen, and you don't know how to make it stop other than pain management. And that's not always the solution, but connecting with these people on a very intimate level and teaming up and deciding on different things we're going to do to spread education and awareness, and to watch them eventually die and questioning when is it going to be my turn.
Yeah, that's really difficult. Thank you for sharing that. And, you know, Susan and Patrice, I just wanted to say that you both mentioned finding people who care, and I'm really excited for the turnout for this event because, you know, all of you care, and I appreciate everyone showing up for this event. Jessica, lastly, do you have any challenges you want to share?
I feel for my co-panelists and the challenge. I don't think there's anything that they really haven't spoken to other than the crowdsourcing. And I would say, and I feel badly saying this because I think like on a comparative level, I feel nothing like Patrice, hearing what you go through just from I was going to say energy. If you had asked me 10 minutes ago, like, what would you say? Is like, it's hard to have the energy to do this, but now I feel like, Patrice, I'm so proud to hear that you use every ounce of energy you have. But I think that's something that, and Susan, you talked about that too, and like continuing your energy when you either are lacking support or you know, or just having a tough day. It's a lot of mental energy, which we know like feeds our physical energy. What I would say on the positive side of that is that when you do get people on board and you get people, that can also be very renewing. I feel like, at least in my situation, like when somebody gets it, you know, and someone like, or even hearing like, yes, they like go out to vote, take control, like share, like do all the things that we're supposed to do to have this, like share your privilege, share your power, and exercise it when you can. So.
Yeah, that actually is a perfect segue into the next question. What are the rewards to your advocacy work? Jessica, you mentioned, you know, your energy, inspiration from others. Is there anything else you want to add to your rewards for your work?
On a day that's tough, or, you know, we're trying, specifically with the legislation, it's a slow process. It's just slower than I'd want it to be. And as most things are, right? We want that like quick reward. These are like, I think about how great things are going to be as we get people to understand what we're doing. Like the thought that at someday, hopefully during my working time, that all students everywhere, you don't have to have an IEP, you don't have to have a 504, you can go to any public school or any public or charter school in the state of New Jersey and have access to academic and social emotional support at your school free of charge. That's enough to keep going and keep doing it, because every kid needs that. And so when people finally start to embrace, like, you know, no one would have wished any of the conditions of the pandemic on anybody. What has come of that, though, is finally more people are waking up to like, wow, we need to help. We need to help these kids. Like, we need to help ourselves. Like, what does that actually mean? We need to take care, like, we need to get back to human beings taking care of other human beings and having that be enough. That's an important enough work. Like, and that's all the work around that generations of people have tried to do around you know, marginalized populations, around disability, around neurodiverse people, all of those things to try to create equity is like, and the stigma that goes with any issue related to struggle, because there's so much there that I think what the reward or like the positive moments are when you can feel that you have some momentum in that movement, or that you move some people's needle. Maybe you can't move everybody's needle, and you might not be able to swing the pendulum all the way to the other side, but you get some kind of something is extremely rewarding. And again, like, I think it's enough to feed into helping bring other people on board with you. Like, you can only be so excited for your own cause, but like, you need other people to get on board with you. But then that also, I think, helps feed, at least for me, it feeds my own energy like back into the project.
Yeah, it keeps you going. Yeah, that's awesome. Susan, what rewards do you see with your work?
Sure. Well, the overall, getting people more engaged in our democracy and making that important in their lives is very, very rewarding. But from a very selfish perspective, for any of you who haven't done a voter registration event, it is one of the biggest dopamine rushes you'll ever get. I mean, you're sitting there, people, first-time voters who are, wanting to get, registered, or people just wanting to talk about, how do I vote? How do I did this? Is really important to me. It will make you want to come back over and over again. It's an overwhelming high that you get from doing this. So that really gets people, coming back, wanting to do it even on really cold days, or, luckily most of the voter registration does happen in the summer and the fall. Some in the winter for a primary, but it makes you want to keep on doing it. So that's really fun. And I highly recommend it to everybody.
Yeah, that sounds so fun. And Patrice, what are some rewards of your work?
Well, besides crowns, because I do, and I will say this, I've competed in many, many, many pageants, and I didn't actually start winning them until I started talking about sickle cell, because I was in sickle cell silence. I didn't want pageant directors or judges to think that I was limited, or that I wouldn't be able to do the job or fulfill the duties of that pageant title. So I kept it a secret for a long time. So then to see that, having competed at state, national, and international levels, where I'm able to connect with so many women of enterprise and empowerment, that I have friends all over the world from so many different countries that now know about sickle cell because of me, and then take that information and they spread that information all over the globe. So that's just a blessing. And I will say, so besides the crowns, the relationships, definitely, and the networking, but also, for lack of sounding maladaptive, that saying that the trash takes itself out. I also, a reward that I've gotten is I've learned who really is there for me and who's not, who really cares and who does not. And these are some members of my own immediate family, who they themselves may even have the sickle cell trait and still choose not to talk about it, and still choose not to participate in my events and activities, or listen to the information that I have to share about the stigmas associated with sickle cell and carriers of the sickle cell trait, and how there's also so many things in common when it comes to what the end result can be. And I have a respect for everyone, that some people are just not, they're not receptive of that information, and I have to just let that be. I don't push my agenda onto anybody, but it also has helped me figure out, especially when I'm going through a sickle cell crisis personally, and I'm not sure if I'm gonna make it out on the other end or not, and seeing what that response is has helped me know who's in my circle, who's in my network, because they say not everyone in your circle is in your corner. So that has been helpful for me, and it's been helpful in my advocacy when I'm working with other members of the sickle cell community.
Thank you. We're gonna switch gears for a little bit and try to tie it back to the counseling community specifically. So this is for our counseling community. So Patrice, we'll start with you. What are some suggestions that you could give counselors that want to do advocacy work, and why should they care?
Well, it is also helpful that as a social worker, I do a lot of counseling. And I think it does help me in my work, because not having biases, remaining non-judgmental, also recognizing that what you see is not always what you get, how there is that underlying trauma. I've had many conversations with parents because I work with children that either have been in foster care or have not. And oftentimes I'll hear from parents, well, she never said anything, or well, he didn't tell me that this is something that was bothering him. And trauma comes in so many different forms. So that first and foremost is recognizing that we have to take our own judgments, our own thoughts, perceptions, and what we think things should look like, and put that to the side, and recognize that someone may need the support with that they're not able to verbalize what they need or what it should look like. So being flexible and being completely and totally unbiased.
Thank you. Yeah, that's essential. Jessica, do you want to share some suggestions you can give counselors to do advocacy work?
I would say, I think one of the best gifts you get within training and the practice of counseling is the ability to really understand people by listening and hearing the unheard, like to Patrice's point of like really get to know you get to know people in a really intimate way, and you should be really thankful for that, I think. And that, I think when we listen to ourselves listening and we process, right, I'm sure, especially, well, I think your whole life as a counselor or social worker, you process like how's your work impacting you, and be in touch with that, with yourself, and listen for your passions. What do you hear from people over and over again? Like, people are giving, in most cases, like telling you things they haven't told anybody else, or sharing things that are deeply hurtful, or really maybe even really impactful in positive ways. And what does that mean for like the making meaning from what people are telling you, finding, and then what speaks to you, because that passion is what keeps you going. And so I think, we help, a lot of us as counselors help individuals, maybe help some families, and maybe we do some groups. Certainly those of us in school still do group counseling. But what can you do with your same skill set of listening, of understanding, and then speaking for all the people who don't have a voice, or who aren't able to share their voice. And when you do that, I think like you carry all your past clients or students with you, but everyone who also maybe hasn't found their person, hasn't found their advocate. And so it's like you're carrying the stories and the history of everyone behind you, but into the future, that you can be a leader. Because I think ultimately advocating is one of the best ways that we serve. In academia, like service to the profession or service to the academy is a little bit different than it is in the field, but service, like advocacy, is service back not only to clients but to our communities, and to the profession. I think like then we're leaders. Counsel, like when you advocate, you're demonstrating leadership in the profession. You're saying like you validate the training that we go through. You validate all the thousands of hours of training time and supervision and learning that you've done, because you're sharing that information and you're standing up for a whole bunch of people who don't have those same things that you have engaged in.
Wow, that was beautiful. Thank you. And Susan, lastly, do you have any suggestions to give counselors in their advocacy work?
Sure. This is, I guess there's two ways to take this. I'll take it. So being a counselor is, it's hard work, right? It's very hard work. And it's solitary work many times, right? You're one-on-one with a client. Sometimes you'll be with groups, but it takes a village to be a good counselor. And part of social advocacy is building this community to help support, all of you on this call as counselors. It's really, really important. And sometimes you don't feel like you are making a difference. Counseling progress is, like an iceberg, right? It takes a long time until you can see some progress sometimes. So building that community to help support you is so important. And I would also say that making a difference, again, it's that iceberg that you may not be feeling like you're making a difference, but as one of my idols in life, John Lewis, said, the vote is the most important, or I'm sorry, the most powerful nonviolent change agent you have in a democratic society. So you can really make a lot of change by, building this community, by, getting involved in, type of, democratic type of building democracy type of work. And then it also applies to your clients, right? So a lot of clients, people usually don't come in for counseling because life is going great and, they have no problems. They're coming in because they need something. And I think it's a great way to grow self-esteem, getting involved in a community. A lot of clients are very, kids too, are very isolated, especially now with, social media and everything else. So it does help provide notice that, to encourage folks to do your clients to do social advocacy work, to build your own community to help support your clients, and to feel empowered. Who doesn't feel disempowered, half the time. So that's a great way. And it's also a great life skill, for the folks that are, dealing with, adults and youth. A lot of people don't vote. That's unfortunately in America, that's the truth. And by feeling empowered to vote, it's it's a great life skill.
So in addition to voting, what are some strategies that counselors can do to get involved in your efforts?
That to me, so join the league, go league. There are leagues all over. So the Montclair Area League does focus mostly on, there are a few other leagues within Essex County, but we all work together. But we're the only one that has area in our name. So we focus all over Essex County. So join the league, volunteer in your community for sure. As I mentioned before about the youth voter education, that's really going to be our focus. So it sounds like there are a lot of folks that are involved in schools. It's a great way. Reach out to your local league. If your school is in Essex County, or reach out to me, and get connected on getting kids or youth and adults, not just youth, but educated in voting and why it's so important. And we're always looking for people who, former teachers or anybody who likes to be in front of a group to help present why voting matters. And also contacts. That's a big part. One of our biggest challenges, which I didn't mention earlier, was to get in school systems, just to get a call back, to be honest with you. I've been trying to get into the East Orange High School for 6 months, and it's been hitting my head against a brick wall, but I'm not giving up. I know that I will get in there sooner or later.
Yes, we believe in you. Patrice, what are some strategies counselors can do to help you in your work?
There's definitely a great need for more support groups, and not just support groups for people that are members of the sickle cell community, but definitely parental advocacy, parent support groups. Because I now, me being a mother, I think that life would have been a lot different for me and my relationship with my parents had my parents received the support that was needed in order for them to support me. So most definitely, and also recognizing that sickle cell takes an incredible toll on one's mental health status. Sorry, sometimes it's a wonder that I'm as functional as I am. I'm going to be completely and totally honest with you, because there's no greater messing up of your mind, and I'm choosing my words wisely, than when you're fine one moment and then the very next you're debilitated and you need to be rushed to the hospital, and you didn't even see it coming. So we definitely do need more people that can support the sickle cell community in counseling, and providing that mental health support, as well as the support of loved ones who have someone with sickle cell in their life, and how they deal. Because I will say, many times when I would watch my mother crying, and saying, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? And I would look at her and say, happening to you? Do you not see all the needles and all the wires attached to me in this hospital bed? And again, it wasn't until I entered the journey of parenthood that I recognized, when your baby hurts, you hurt. And also knowing that it's genetically inherited, and that this is something she essentially gave me, and it's not her fault. So I know it's not just reduced to me and my mother. There's hundreds of thousands of families out there that are experiencing the same thing and need someone to talk to.
Thank you. And Jessica, how can counselors support you in your efforts?
So, well, anyone in the school counseling track at Montclair, if you are not a member of New Jersey School Counselors Association, I strongly recommend you join. There is a student rate that you get through your graduation, and we love to get students involved. We actually don't have a representative from Montclair State on our board right now. We had somebody that graduated, so that's one of the positions that changes pretty frequently. So if you're interested and want to get involved, we are always looking for volunteers. It's typically an hour or two a week for the legislative efforts. Also, everyone, and to speak, this is perfect that we did something about voting, because every registered voter, I'm going to put in the chat, can write to, hopefully this is gonna, let me find the right link. We currently have a voter voice campaign for our piece of legislation, which you can read more about if I can get it to load. Otherwise, I'll just send it to Dr. Koyman to send out. So this is a way to let it works, like it looks up by your address, who your legislators are for the state of New Jersey, and you can either take send a written message of your own, or you can take just the canned message that would go to your senator and your assembly people in your district. So again, that would be, I would love it if everyone who lives in New Jersey would do that, but certainly anyone on this call, feel free, you can spread that to anybody. They don't need to be a counselor. Any registered voter can send that, and that will hopefully help us move this, our bill across the finish line this legislative session.
Amazing. Yes, I hope we will all do that. Thank you, Jessica. And I just have to say, I am so inspired and in awe of all of you. And I'm just so honored that I get the chance to speak with you. And that being said, I'm going to pass it on to Stephanie to open the floor to questions and comments from our participants.
Yes, thank you so much, Jenny. So we're going to open the floor for any questions that any questions that we might have for the panelists. And at that same time, I would like to encourage the panelists to put contact information, any way to, if any of our members want to reach out to you, to join you in your advocacy efforts. I know I want to join. I want to do as much as I can to support. So as we're waiting for our comments and questions, I will encourage you guys to put in your information in our chat.
Well, I have a question. I have a question for Susan, because we just had the election last week, and it's really it's interesting times that we're living in right now. And I teach at an undergraduate class, and they're all 18 years old. And I brought up voting. And when I was 18, I was excited to vote. And of course, Barack Obama was, in the presidency, but I was super excited to vote. And when I brought up voting to my students to encourage them, they all looked at me like, yeah, no, nothing's going to change, so I'm not voting. And I'm like, when do you think the culture changed where I know if I don't vote, my parents will literally get on me. They call me now, make sure you vote. what do you think has changed about the culture where voting, something that we fought for to have the right, especially as a person of color, it's not even a priority anymore?
Yeah, I don't know the overall answer to that, but voting participation rates have steadily declined over the decades. I don't, I mean, it does seem very dysfunctional system out there. So I can see why people are skeptical about it. But you know, when you have like a candidate that inspires people, then people do come out, which we have seen right in the 2000s. So you know, I don't know if we can put it all on the lack of good candidates, but you know, I think it is. I think what you're saying is true. I think it's you know, I hear a lot of people who have told me, you know, if I don't vote, my parents will get really mad at me. So there is a cultural context to that. I felt the same way growing up. So I don't know. You know, and you have other countries. Someone was telling me, I was on a league call, or I was over listening to a league call in their country of origin, and they said that you had to I think they did it through fingerprints, and if you don't vote you end up getting fined. And her husband was had dual citizenship, and he hadn't voted because he wasn't living in the country, but when he came back for a visit he still got fined because, which I thought, yeah, we should do something like that, you know, make sure everybody votes. I don't know, that's a whole nother level of advocacy. But yeah, I wish I knew. If you know what the problem is and you can solve it better, right? And I don't know, but it is very disheartening.
We do have another question from Jonna. Social justice advocacy can be tough work. I'm wondering how you all engage in self-care practices to manage some of the challenges associated with advocacy work.
I mean, I can tell you, I am so passionate about what I do. That keeps me going. However, that is also why I've gone overboard many times. There was an issue, an issue in Montclair last year, and I mean, I felt like I was back, you know, working in Manhattan and, you know, crazy hours, and you know, I wasn't even, not that I had to be paid for it, but it wasn't like anything. There was no external benefit other than what, you know, I was gleaming from it. But yes, you know, and then I was able to, you know, fortunately there's usually an election that then stops whatever, you know, so there is a hard stop on that, things like that, like project work, which is what I did when I worked in the city. But yeah, a lot of it is just, you know, having the support in the community, which is really helpful, because most people you're working with are going through the same thing. And you know, the basics, right? Eating well, sleeping, reaching out to people. So but yeah, it's a real hazard to the social advocacy work.
I would love to lie to you and say that I engage in like warm baths and I go to the spa and that I meditate. I don't do any of that stuff. I pour all of my energy and my free time into my kid. Helping people is what makes me happy. And my son, he's just my greatest joy. So knowing like I can do things that make him happy and put a smile on his face, even just hang out with him, whether we're watching TV and he's on his tablet and I'm in my cell phone and we don't say one word to each other, that is self-care to me, because we're just in sharing space and we're still spending quality time together. Or if we are going on an adventure of some sort, just he and I, or with some friends, I just, it was just his birthday last week, and this was just the greatest thing that anyone has ever said to me. And my son he stops what he's doing, looks me dead in the eye, and he says, "You really are the best mom in the world." And I said, "You're just saying that because it's your birthday and I'm buying you whatever you want." And he said, "No, because I think the things you do for me, most people wouldn't do for their children." So just seeing that in his 10-year-old mind and body and spirit, that he recognizes that. And I also, first and foremost, cling to my faith. I trust and believe in God, whether other people do or don't, that's between you and him. But and then I've always said I only want to be two things: a good Christian and a good mother. And just yesterday, my cross broke off of the chain that I normally wear. And my son picked it up and he holds it upside down. He said, "I know why the cross is uneven and it's not a T." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because when you turn it upside down, it's like a sword to protect you, and God will always protect you." So again, the fact that this 10-year-old little boy, that's the message he received, and I don't pour religion down his throat, but the fact that he embraces it, and I just see me in him, and I'm raising, what I think will be a respectable, good human being. That's my self-care.
Jessica, do you have any self-care strategies you'd like to share? And thank you so much, Susan and Patrice, for what you've contributed.
So in the middle, like where I am right now, I'm not really winning it. I'm not winning at the self-care game, but I would. Somebody asked me to talk about my dissertation process last week, and I almost burst into tears while on the Zoom call. So this is probably not like the best time, but I would say hands down, get yourself a therapist. Go to counseling. Do the work. In absence of that, have your person or your people, but I consider Linda my person. And I think from the balance of like just the overwhelming, like where to put things, like you sometimes need, like a mentor of mine a long time ago said, even if you don't go to counseling a lot or for a long time, like you need to go and like do a mind dump, with some, like was truly non-judgmental. So I feel like, yeah, that would be my, I've given up a lot of other things to take care of myself, but I still see Linda every other week on Zoom.
That brings me to a question that I actually have, which, how has COVID, because we've noticed so many changes with COVID, how has COVID impacted your advocacy efforts?
I feel like for us and doing the legislative work, it's actually been pretty helpful because getting people together who have tight schedules or different schedules has been remarkably easier. You're not traveling, like you can have people at different parts of the state. So like in our group, in our legislative group, there's literally someone in Cape May, there's someone in West Morris, they probably, I don't know that they'll ever meet in person. And then that's all the other people, the legislators, they have staff like trying to do all of that and not have to travel. It's been a lot easier for us to get access to people by having the convenience of Zoom and Google Meet.
I wholeheartedly second that. Because of our new world and because of the luxury of Zoom, I've managed to be able to communicate and meet with local, state, and federal branches of legislation to discuss sickle cell and what we need to do as far as prioritizing it and recognizing, what accommodations people with sickle cell need in the educational system as well in the workforce and just generally in the community.
Yeah, for us, getting together and organizing, whether it's volunteers or work that we're doing as a group, that has been, the Zoom has been great. That has been wonderful. We get a lot more participation at meetings, which I don't think we'll ever not do Zoom in the future. What we found actually in a lot of groups I'm part of, people don't want to give up. Like even if in person is available, they're like, no, I want to, maybe we can do it once a month in person, but I want to Zoom the other, like they can't even make it like halfway down the block. It's too far for them. But because a lot of our work is in-person voter registration, that was a huge, huge mountain to get over. We had volunteers who didn't want, we were all, remember back in the day, nobody wanted to get COVID and people weren't doing that. Places were closed. And there was no online voter registration at that point like we have now. Luckily, we are back to doing in-person events for both volunteers and in schools in particular are more comfortable with that now. But we did have the Lucite, things. We had masks. We were like wiping down everything. I'm just glad that those days are over, knock on wood. So, but we made it through. You make it through. You make adjustments.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to move over to Cheyenne, who has her hand raised.
Hi, I guess my question is kind of more for Jessica because it's kind of geared more towards like school counseling. You kind of mentioned how a lot of school counselors, like their role as a mental health like professional kind of gets pushed aside. And I've read that in a lot of like my class readings too, how like they get assigned with kind of all these other tasks that aren't exactly related to being like a mental health professional. And then I was reading like the link that you sent with, I guess I'm going to use the word proposal with like what it is to have a better outlined of what a school counselor is. I guess my question is, I understand reaching out to like legislators and people in charge, but do you also kind of advocate on a lower level where you talk to your own administrative and say like, hey, like I would like to focus more on like the mental health aspect, or I think that should be incorporated more into like our district? Or do you just kind of like go, I guess, straight up to where the change would like be made for all, if that makes sense?
Sure. Yeah, it makes sense. I would say both. It's important at the local level. I think that's one of the things, like I'm very appreciative for the amount, like having some level of power as the director for the school district, because I can be the voice locally and can help advocate even, to our board members. One of the things when I first got here, I successfully navigated being able to hire 3 additional elementary school counselors that showed, like everything that you learn in those books about the national model. By the way, you should know what that is and everything that goes along with it with tiered systems of support. But when you start, that's one of those things, like you have to talk to educators about and education stakeholders, i.e. your board of education superintendent, about how the data that you produce as a counselor doing counselor appropriate tasks helps kids be successful. So the words that I use a lot is, even for teachers who want to know why we have kids out of class to regulate or because they can't sit there, that we as counselors, we are always working towards helping students be available for learning, right? We do teach them skills, especially at the lower grades, and prevention work we know works. There's a lot of data around that, a lot of research around that. And so I think it's early often in everything you do. And I do say, like, and I mentioned this before, if I could wave a magic wand, in addition to every public and charter school student having access to a school counselor, I would also wave that wand and have a team of people to talk about what we do. Because it's very hard, like the balance locally, especially, is if you're doing the work, it's really hard to talk about the work. Because and Susan mentioned it's isolating. Our doors are closed. Like, what are you doing with that kid in there? And then you can't really talk about it because most of what you're doing in there, you can't share with anybody. So I think that I think that the power of doing it together in county organizations, in local organizations, even in your own organization, talking to different stakeholders who are similar but have different jobs. So like a lot of people, general public, educators, parents, other stakeholders think that social workers and school psychologists do what we do. And we know that they don't. At least not in the state of New Jersey, and at least not most of the time. And so I think it's all of those things. Why we are going from the top down is that there's a lot of law and code, administrative code that dictates what happens in school. And so superintendents, right, they're like the CEOs of these little corporations. Then you have an executive county superintendent, and you have a state board of education, which is only 9 regular people, but they are appointed by the governor. And are nominated by the governor, I guess approved by the legislature, and other people in the education world. So, but you also have, and if you've been in New Jersey a long time, and or you're following anything with politics, education policy and law is super political, and there's a lot of things that go on, and there's millions. The NJEA spends $7 million a year. $7 million a year of their own people's, of which school counselors are included, money to advocate for the laws they do and do not want passed. And so it has to be all of those things, because helping people understand like where you fit into each piece of this puzzle, including what the end game is to take care of kids, to create better futures for our kids, to equalize power differentials and end marginalization and have more acceptance. We have to be, it's like, that's the, I guess, what goes back to the challenge of like, you have to do all those things at the same time. And which is why I would say, go back to the beginning of like, do what you're doing, know why you're doing it, and be able to give somebody a really short speech really frequently about why you're doing what you're doing.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Yes, thank you so much, Jessica. I think that that same message was echoed with a lot of what Patrice and Susan had mentioned throughout our workshop. I'm going to pass over the mic to Timmy. I know that they have a question. Their hand is raised.
Hi, sorry, yeah, that my camera's off, I'm driving. But yeah, so my question mainly is, was kind of a comment, also a question, because I was hearing the conversation that was happening about like voting and like kind of the apathy that's been happening. There's kind of been a huge cultural shift. And so, well, like, of course, I also can't say I have like the one definitive answer. Like, I feel like one major thing that's been happening is the fact that there's been a lot more accessibility as to like kind of like what's happening within Congress with like social media and stuff. And also with that accessibility, there could be some misinformation. But a lot of times I think a lot of the apathy kind of comes about when they're the person that you voted for maybe stated that something was going to come in place and then you don't see it into fruition. And then of course with also what happened during the time for like people who might have a more progressive leaning or even not even progressive, like if they're voting and then like you see the popular vote was one and then the electoral college brought another. I think all of that kind of just shows like the limitations of like the current democracy that we're having. So with that, and then with it that like instead of like maybe being motivated to like advocate for something different, somebody kind of goes into some learned helplessness. What are some ways that you guys think we can encourage and empower our clients to view these like, you know, people problems? Because the thing is that the government is run by people who are also limited in like, who have their own biases and are not perfect. How do you think we can encourage our clients whenever they're facing with those clients and teachers as well, whenever they're faced with that issue of seeing that like, oh, this isn't as simple as I thought it was going to be. Things are not going to go out the way that I thought it was going to happen. How do you like envision speaking to people about that?
I would just, I would encourage people to speak up and speak out. You know, you can experience an entire explosion, a disaster by a fire can be sparked by just one spark, you know, and that's just it, is sometimes you have to make noise. I was sharing how I kept myself in sickle cell silence, and I was doing a disservice to myself and to my community. So it's finding those people, other people who care, whether they are experiencing that themselves, or they care enough to want to take action. I find that the greatest advocates for sickle cell are people who do not have sickle cell, that do not have anybody that they know or love with sickle cell, but just care. There's many people that participate in cancer research and education and awareness just because they are aware that this is a global issue, and as is sickle cell. So in touching upon everything that the panelists have brought forth today, I'm even thinking of how I needed someone like Jessica when I was in school, but because of who we voted for and because of what the government says can and cannot be done in schools, I didn't qualify for an IEP or a 504 when I needed that support because I had a debilitating illness that kept me out of school for a whole month. I was in a hospital bed. And So not only did what I'm getting at is I could not receive counseling because it wasn't on my IEP, because my IEP didn't exist. So if perhaps we are having those conversations, with our local, state, and federal government, and we're prioritizing that and voting for the people that actually are backing that much needed support and doing what they say they're going to do, then we would have people like Jessica that are recognized as mental health professionals doing exactly what it is that she does and generating more mental health professionals in the school systems, so that people such as me are then able to get that advocacy and that support, and the knowledge and education that's being spread, it doesn't go in vain. Does that make sense? I hope that.
I know we have like 4 minutes. And so we will have to close our questions here. And but I want to first say to our panelists, first of all, Patrice, I love how you just tied all 3 panelists together, and all of the work and what it means and why it's so important and why we had this event today. And it is just so important how you tied everything all together to basically make it make sense. What is our purpose here? And I'm just so grateful. First of all, your story almost brought me to tears earlier, and I'm trying to be really sensitive to that, but it is amazing. And Susan and Jessica, all of your work and all of the things that you all are doing in the community is just what we want our future counselors, our counselors in the field, and our educators to encourage our students to do. This is essentially what our mission is in the American Counseling Association, is to go towards social justice advocacy. So to see all the work that you're doing in the community is just very inspiring. And I hope that everyone takes what you all told us today and leaves and like, oh, I'm gonna find an issue. And if they don't have an issue yet, maybe join the team or something like that, right? And so I want to thank all of the participants who came out today to support Chi Sigma Iota. First of all, we wouldn't be here without you. It wouldn't be a panel discussion without you. And we're truly grateful that you took time out of your Tuesday to come and kick it with us here virtually. You're right. Virtually has done a lot for us and has allowed us to be accessible to many people. So we're truly grateful for, even though the pandemic wasn't favorable, it definitely brought us this. Chi Sigma Mu, on behalf of our e-board, we're going to send you all a thank you for joining, in addition to the video, the recording. So even if there's something that you missed, you'll still have the recording to go back to just have as a reference, in addition to all of the contact information from our wonderful panelists today. I want to thank you. I want to thank you, Jenny. You are an amazing moderator. I want to thank you, e-board team, for all of the hard work that you do. And it doesn't go unnoticed. Really love and care about you. And if you have anything else to say, I'll keep it on for a little bit while longer. But thank you all for such a successful event. It was such an amazing opportunity to be in your presence. Thank you.
This was a privilege. It was a privilege. Thank you.
Yes, thank everybody who was part of putting this on and the people who took the time to be here. It's such an important issue. So thank you all.
Yes, thank you all. It was great to be here. And stay in touch.
Yes, they said stay in touch. They said join the league. We need more people. And I'm just loving the feminine energy. I'm not gonna lie. I really love it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Particularly thank you, the panelists. Great job. Beautiful. Sorry I had to pop in and out with what I was doing here, but great work. Thank you.
Yes, very inspiring. Thank you so much for your time and for all that you do.
Well, take care, everybody.
Bye-bye. Have a good afternoon.
Bye.